so today we're looking at two elements that are really closely related. There's actually more than two here. But we'll start by looking at the element of actual texture. And on the computer, obviously, we probably won't have actual texture unless we print it on something different. But if something has actual texture, you can see that when you touch the surface, it's either really smooth or it feels crackly or bumpy. And these pieces here all have actual texture. The other type of texture it could have is synthetic texture, and that's what we would make on the computer, and that's when it looks like it's bumpy and has surface, but we've only simulated it. And the third type of texture that you probably won't use, but you'd see it with actual texture is called subversive texture, and that's when the texture doesn't feel like it fits. For example, this girl with a really furry face, Oppenheimer did a mug with sable fur on the inside. It's texture that goes beyond the normal and then is subversive, like broken glass. All right, so if you have texture, oftentimes then you have repetition, which is a principle, which includes things like rhythm, and you've got pattern, repetition. Texture has repetition. So if you have pattern repetition, it can be a pattern that totally repeats itself in a normal way, or as you see, some of this pattern repeats itself in more of a natural way, which texture will do, or it can be in a very designerly way. So this is with pattern as repetition. Here is then pattern that goes into repetition and movement, which comes into rhythm. So this has kind of a simulated texture, but there is also then repetition of the things going on and then movement going back and forth between. And here is simulated texture with repetition and pattern, and you see the actual movement. So these elements and principles are all very closely related to each other. Here is movement, where you see the texture, you see the repetition of the pattern, and it has actual physical movement in it. And then the next one that I have here is more of a kind of an organic one, because these are mosaics, and then the artist then has broken the pieces of glass, and you've got the repetition and the actual physical texture and the rhythm within the piece. So what we're going to do in Photoshop then, go ahead and pull up your Photoshop, is you're going to go online and look for pieces that have texture and movement in it. And I have some here that I have gone, let's see, where is it? Gone online here, and I found different patterns here. I look for physical patterns of fabrics and things like that. Sometimes dots, sometimes you could do flowers. And the very simple way to do it actually creates a pattern, but it does with squares. So here I'm going to go and start, and I want to show you how to do it so it doesn't have squares. Go into Google, and we're going to look for patterns. And when I go to images and patterns, sometimes these are Photoshop patterns, and it will make a seamless pattern, but most of them won't. And if a seamless pattern is, that means that this side here is going to touch this side here and be reversed. And this one, I can see that this has the edge of that, and this has the edge of that. So side to side it looks like it's seamless, but up and down it isn't. So you'll see that when we pour these out into a pattern texture. So you can come find you one that you like. This one probably is seamless because it's zigzag. This one might be. We'll just have to try it. This one I know it won't, so I'm going to try that one. And I'm going to go click on View Image and save the image to my, I'm going to put it on my desktop so it's easier. And we're going to make our own pattern based on that. So then you go to Photoshop, and we're going to go File and Open. And we're going to look at my desktop and open the pattern that I just had there. And this is really a big pattern because you can see it's like 30 inches here. So let's say if we want to select all of it, we could actually make that a big pattern to use in Photoshop. And all we have to do to make it a pattern is go Edit to Define Pattern. And now we'll call it, it's a patterns wallpaper. We could call it something else, colorful squares. Oops, be nice if I could spell that. And click OK. And then now when I go to my paint bucket over here, if you haven't used your paint bucket yet, we'll do this. We'll do a brand new document. And create. Now when I'm on my paint bucket here, then anything that I draw or fill, I can click and do it as a regular color. So there's what it looked like with red. It was the paint bucket. So I could do, I could select an area. Right now I'm going to select a square, and then I can fill it in then with the paint bucket tool. And so anything that I select, whether it's a shape, I could come around with a lasso or magnetic lasso and make a shape. Or, let's see, where's my Photoshop go? Sorry about that. So anything here that I select, I could fill in the shape with the paint bucket, just as long as I've made the hole. Okay, so I could do any of these selection tools and select it and do that. The other thing that's under your paint bucket is a gradient tool. And notice the gradient right now that's there is pulled up the two colors that I have. That it's got the brown, which is on top, and the red that's behind it. And I can do a gradient over the whole entire thing, which looks like that. Or I can select again an area and then do a gradient on the area. And then that way that'll allow us to use the shapes. That one, it did it all black. Let's see if I could do it bigger. So you can do either direction. And there's all these different gradients that you can do back and forth. All right, and then the third one is when you're on your paint bucket. And it has to be the paint bucket, not the gradient. Up here where it says foreground, it also has pattern. So I have just created a new pattern. These are patterns that I have saved on my computer. And I did this one up here. So wherever I select a piece, then I can come with the pattern tool and the paint bucket and pour that pattern in. And notice the little square stripes, and that's what we're going to try to avoid, because anything that I do, that's not going to look natural. So if I decided I wanted a wall behind this piece, and maybe I had a red floor and I want, or maybe I have a red background and these are on the wall and I want a checkerboard floor, if I go and pour that pattern in the background, now it doesn't look like a checkerboard floor because it has all of these division areas. And that's what I'm talking about, a non-seamless pattern, that one is not seamless. And one of the things I want to teach you how to do is do seamless. But for this little video here, I want you to just save a variety of things, and then try pouring out your paint bucket, try pouring out some shapes. We'll go back then to our Google patterns here, and you can choose any one you want here. go to the image and come and right click it and save the image, and then you come into your Photoshop and open that image up and open, and then edit and define the pattern, and then try going to your paint bucket and pouring out that pattern and do the one that we were doing. And right away you can tell if it's going to be a problem and be seamless or not by whether or not it has the squares.